It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of a bank in formation. Take charge of your financial future with Your Personal Bank. Now here's Ference Toth.
Welcome to Your Personal Bank Show, and I'll tell you what, we're going to do something a little bit different today and fun. What I want to do is really kind of share some stories, some famous ones and some not so famous ones, in terms of what people have done using Your Personal Bank and what they've accomplished with it. And the reason I think I want to bring this up is twofold. One, I've had several folks, some clients, in fact, this past week I've been dealing with, who've asked me to share some of the ideas, some of the uses, and how people have used this tool. And, of course, obviously Your Personal Bank tool is combining, if you don't know, it's combining an insurance product with a banking tool to create positive arbitrage. We'll go into it a little further as we go forward if you're not familiar. But secondly, the other reason I think is this has been a tough year. And we've had to talk a lot about a lot of, well, not so pleasant things. How's that? Things like viruses and shutdowns and, shortages on grocery shelves and lots of uncertainty and ups and downs and election. I mean, it's been, gosh, what a year. And I don't think anybody who's lived through this year is going to soon forget it. And I think I can speak for most people. I think we're looking forward to it coming to an end. So hopefully we can get back to some sense of normalcy next year. That's, I think, I've seen some people say, 2020, it's just time to punt and move on and let's start over. You know what I mean? So I get what you're saying. But, we got to get through. We've got some to go. But anyway, I want to talk about some more fun stuff, some positive things. Like I said, some stories, a few famous. We'll start with a few fun, famous ones, and then I can delve into some not so famous ones that are just interesting. And again, what Your Personal Bank is, real quick, for those of you that don't know, like I said, we're using a banking and insurance financial tool to create positive arbitrage. What we do is we set up a high cash value policy. This is not a policy most people are familiar with. This is something designed to grow cash. We have companies that have been paying 6% dividends or greater for the last 25 years. I'll show you the companies. They're A-plus rated. They're household names, have billions of dollars in reserves, fully capable of paying solid dividends out for the foreseeable future. Many of these companies have paid dividends and never missed since before the Civil War, literally. I'll show you which companies these are. I'll show you all the companies, the top dividend payers, who's out there, who's paying, and what they've done every year for the last 25 years, for example. So you can get a really good idea. And that surprises a lot of people. There's companies that are doing that. And when you consider structuring this correctly, tax-free, 6% dividends tax-free consistently over the last 25 plus years, that's strong, okay? I think by most anyone's measure. The second step is, of course, we set up a bank line of credit. And the idea there is, of course, you can access funds from basically the collateral for the line of credit is the cash in the policy. And the bank lines are in the 3 to 3.95% range currently. So if you're earning 6 and you're getting charged in the 3s when you access the funds, what's your money doing? It's still growing. You're keeping the difference. You're keeping 2 to 3% positive arbitrage currently. And if we look at the history, long-term history of interest rates and dividends and how these pay, using the bank lines or using the policies directly, historically you get a positive arbitrage on money you spend. So the bottom line, I tell people this really quite simple. If you put it in, you keep the money there, you get 6% dividends, tax-free if we set it up correctly, which we will, and that ain't bad. And then if you access the funds and use them for whatever reason to invest in other things, pay off bills, pay down debt, whatever it is you're using the monies for, you're still picking up 2 or 3% positive arbitrage. Well, gosh, that's just free money, folks. That's gravy. That's not in addition. That's not in place of, but that's in addition to. So I always point out, if your return on your investment, if you take those dollars and invest in something, you make a 7% return, for example, well, do you want to add 2 or 3% to that and make 9 or 10? You see my point. And that increases the rate of return significantly. In most cases, when we deal with folks like this, we're increasing rates of returns by 20, 30% or more, okay? So it's huge, okay, especially over time. But to get to some fun stories, one of the first ones, is, and these are some of the more well-documented cases that have happened throughout history and more famous famous people that most people would recognize. One of the more famous ones is Ray Kroc, McDonald's. And one of the reasons I want to share some of these famous stories, and again, not so famous, is, this isn't an idea. This isn't a new idea. This has been around for decades and decades. It's been working for a long, long time. and successfully for many people. And so this will just give you an idea of some situations, some cases where people have used this. So Ray Kroc's example, like I said, pretty well documented actually. In his early days, when starting McDonald's and franchising, he was really struggling with finances and paying his key people and managers and stuff like that. And understand, when Ray was doing that, franchising was in its infancy. It wasn't something that was well known. To get bank funding for business, a franchise business back then, was difficult, if not impossible. And so him to access funds to build his business through the traditional bank lending process was just really not an option. And I think you'll find this as kind of a consistent process through many of these examples that I'm sharing with you. So he accessed funds from his policy. He's able, in most of these cases, they were able to still maintain some positive arbitrage. So in other words, when you're accessing funds from the policy, either directly or through the bank line, some used both, some didn't. But the reality is, by getting some positive arbitrage, not only did they not lose the dollars that they were allocating, in Ray Kroc's example, to pay as managers and key people to keep McDonald's afloat in the early days till it got going, but they were still able to make money on those dollars, at least keep the difference of what they were earning minus what they were getting charged. So the money was still growing, okay? And then later on, of course, that balloons out and they get successful and profitable and pay it back. And, everything really works out well, if you know what I'm saying. But, like I said, he created the initial Ronald McDonald advertising campaign by using cash from his policy, using policy loans and accessing the funds. So it's kind of interesting. There'd probably be no Big Macs. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. And certainly no Ronald McDonald. Ronald McDonald House, for example, is something that's a great charity, I know. Those kinds of things wouldn't exist without the personal bank concept, without the high cash value policies, and to be able to access funds from those, okay? Another example, very well known, is Walt Disney. Walt, when he was wanting to open Disneyland, he was actually turned down by over 300 banks. They basically, including his brother, who turned him down for a loan to open and start Disneyland. Walt didn't give up on his dream. And of course, today we have Disneyland and Mickey Mouse and all of that because he took $1 million loan from his policy, cash from his policy, to start and build Disneyland. So there would be no Disneyland or Disney World or Mickey Mouse as we know it. Probably Disney wouldn't be the same company it is today if it hadn't been for his ability to take funds from that after, again, getting turned down by three. Think about that a minute. Over 300 banks turned him down. That's persistence. I mean, I don't know how many folks out there, I could say including myself, that would continue requesting and pursuing a dream, a vision like that after 300 turndowns. But he kept going and ultimately succeeded. But the personal bank, the cash value in his policy, it was a big part of what made it happen, okay? Another example I can give you is Bob Hope. Now, this one I find interesting. You don't hear as much about this one. It's in his autobiography. That's where I found this, and Bob Hope himself talks about this. And I would highly recommend, if you haven't read this, it's in a section in his book, in his autobiography that he shared. And, Bob Hope, those of you who don't know, most do, very, successful comedian, obviously, and movie star in his career. And those that don't know, he later became a very successful businessman and was worth well over $100 million when he passed away. So I think most people's definition, he was quite successful. He was well known for that. Stay tuned to the next segment. I'm going to talk more about Bob Hope's story and some other famous examples regarding your personal bank.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Well, we're doing something kind of fun today. We're sharing some famous stories of some folks that have used the Your Personal Bank concept successfully throughout history. Again, this is not a new concept or a new idea by any stretch. Using the cash value in a policy, accessing those funds, and then, receiving positive arbitrage either with the policy or with the bank line of credit so that your money's still growing even though you're using it or allocating it for other purposes. is a very, very powerful financial tool. In fact, I was speaking to a client, I believe it was yesterday, the day before. He's already got a couple of these policies he's set up over the last decade. He's been funding them. Very smart gentleman, real estate investor, business owner. And it keeps working. So he keeps putting more money into it because it just keeps working. And he pointed out to me, he asked me this question. He said, look, I've got another real estate deal coming through. I've got a windfall coming in. I don't know, somewhere around he's a couple $100,000, give or take. And it's kind of a one-time windfall he's expecting. He's like, what do you think I should do? Should I take the funds, put them in and set up another one of these policies and access it and then reinvest in my real estate? Or should I just go straight to the real estate or some other investment or whatnot? And my response was really pretty much straightforward. I said to him, look, putting the money in the policy where you're going to have about 85% access to the funds day one, if you do a front load, which is what we're talking about doing there, accessing them through the bank line of credit and picking up 2-3%, 3% in his case, positive arbitrage. That's hard to beat. And you can still go and do your real estate investment and make whatever return it is you're going to make. And he said, I agree with you completely. So he's going to set up another one. I mean, that's just the kind of thing that happens, I run into on a daily basis. Okay? But I promised to share some more stories of some famous folks. I've shared the story of Walt Disney and Ray Kroc so far, who used this tool to help get McDonald's started. The Ronald McDonald marketing campaign came as a result of this. Disney was turned down by over 300 banks to start Disneyland. So Disneyland was funded by this concept. We wouldn't have it. So anybody who's been to Disneyland can thank the high cash value policies and the personal bank concept for the fact that Disneyland exists. Of course, without Disneyland, there probably would have not been a Disney World either, right? Bob Hope's example is lesser known, but interestingly, it's first-person experience. It's shared in his autobiography. So if you haven't read it, it's an interesting read. It was put out quite a few years ago, but it's still very interesting. And, what many people may not know about Bob Hope, of course, most people know him as a very successful comedian throughout his lifetime, very well liked and respected. Later in life, he became a very well-respected businessman. He was actually worth over $100 million when he passed away. So I think by most anyone's definition, he was quite successful. And in his book, he talks about when he first got his first big vaudeville contract. So this was like in 1928, okay? So it's going back a ways. Again, this is the other thing I want you folks to understand. This is not a new idea. This has been around for quite some time and has worked very well for many, many decades. But he got his first, he was a struggling performer like many are for quite some time prior to that, got his first big contract, and he was all excited. He was having dinner with a friend of his, and this is in his autobiography. And a fellow vaudeville performer who had then later gone into the life insurance business. But they were having dinner, and he was all excited because he got his first big check. And he was asking his friend, do you think I should buy a Cadillac or I think a LaSalle at the time? In other words, it was a check big enough that he could buy a new, nice car. So it gives you an idea. Pretty nice check for somebody who's been a struggling artist his whole life. And his friend grabbed the check. He said, no. What we're going to do is we're going to put 10% of this away. I'll send you the rest. You can have fun. But you're going to put this away into a policy and grow some cash and build your future. And he listened. And by the way, Bob mentions, and this is a very valuable financial literacy key, he said it was one of the smartest things he ever did. Basically, he got paid, I think it was weekly at the time, and every week he would send the 10% to his friend and put funds in the policy. Of course, not too long after that, the Great Depression hit. And as he points out in the book, not only did he kept funding it, he was fortunate he kept making money, but two, the investments and the tools, the funds he put it into the policy didn't lose. Okay? So these are guaranteed. These contracts are guaranteed. They're insured. People don't lose money on these, okay? Folks didn't lose money through the Great Depression through these types of contracts, okay? These financial tools. Not many things can say that. So after that was all over, he had an opportunity. Then later, the studio came to him with Fred Astaire in the 1940s, and the studio and him about doing a series of movies. And basically they offered, the studio offered a third ownership. So a third. Studio owner third, Fred Astaire a third, and Bob Hope a third. But he had to come up with the money to be able to finance, these movies and then be a one-third owner. And he didn't have it really. And he went to talk to his friend about it. He says, no, remember this, these checks you've been putting into this policy all these years? It's been growing. It's been growing every year consistently, steady. He had one of the steady Eddie, consistent ones I talk about all the time. And he had enough money in that he was able to access and be able to become, producer of the movies, which made him a multimillionaire. And he points out that was his big break. So that's what launched him to financial success. He was a successful comedian prior to that for quite some time, decade or more. But that's where his financial success really came into play. And he fully credits, and in fact, he spoke at his friend's retirement dinner and retold that whole story. And he talks about all this in the book. So in his autobiography. So the point is, putting money away over a long extended period of time obviously works. It's a success tactic, a financial literacy thing that everyone should follow. And two, these are the consistent, steady, compound interest, tax-free benefits that are offered by the policies in your personal bank concept. And then the ability to access the funds for opportunities when they present themselves, like in Bob Hope's case, can be life-changing. And remember, you don't give up the money. The money was still there growing. You're still getting some positive arbitrage. So he's able to take advantage of the opportunity, yet allow his monies to still grow. That's what's so cool about this. Another example, one more recent, Sam Walton. A lot of people don't realize this, but and it's pretty well documented, he used the cash value in his policies to grow wealth and pass it on basically to the future generations after Walmart had become quite successful, and they're still one of the richest families, frankly, in the world probably, certainly in the U.S. And tax-free cash value policies, the tax-free benefits, the ability to pass on to the next generation is a very, very powerful tool. And the Walton family have used it quite effectively. So where Sam maybe didn't do it in the beginning stages like Bob Hope did it to build up wealth and then take advantage of opportunity, Sam Walton used it later in life as a way to pass on a significant amount of assets on a tax-free basis to the next generation. Okay? And if you talk to any tax attorney worth their salt, they'll tell you that this is an extremely commonly used tool. In fact, it's one of their number one tools in their bag of tricks, so to speak. Number one tools in their tool case that they use to pass on wealth from one generation to the next on a tax-favored basis. That's what tax attorneys do. One of the biggest things that they do in terms of estate planning and tax planning, again, generational tax planning. So Sam Walton's one of those that use this tool. Okay. Another one is Franklin Roosevelt. Again, another quite well-documented case. In fact, the majority of Roosevelt's net worth, like the vast majority of his net worth when he passed away, happened to be in cash value life insurance. He was a firm believer in it. He had over 15 million of it, okay, which was a majority of his net worth, far more than half. These are people who, there's somebody who was high in power, president for decades, right? 4-term president, certainly had the access and ability to, contacts into some of the brightest minds out there, and obviously firm believer, and he used this as a tool not only to grow wealth, to pass it on to the next generation also. I'm going to share a few more examples. This is kind of just some fun to give you some ideas of what can be done and how this can be used, so stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back. We're doing something kind of fun today. We're sharing some famous stories of different folks who have used the Your Personal Bank concept, high cash value policies, to make a difference financially in their lives. And I'm sharing a number of famous examples because, it's fun to do that, but it also gives you ideas of different ways that people have used this. And I've already shared in the first segments, Ray Kroc with McDonald's. In fact, is how he helped get McDonald's off the ground in the early days and funded the Ronald McDonald advertising campaign. So, the other example is Walt Disney, turned down by over 300 banks to build Disneyland, and used the cash in his policy to do it. That was the only way he could get it done. Bob Hope, I shared the story about what he did, building it over time and eventually helping him become a multimillionaire by being a producer in some of the movies that he starred in. Franklin Roosevelt was another one example. Vast majority of his wealth, total personal wealth, was in high cash value policies. He was a firm believer in that. If you want to hear the rest of the stories, go to yourpersonalbank.com. I share more of it, obviously, from the previous segments. I'm going to share a couple others here. Walmart, I think I touched on that one, where the Walton family, I should say, used this tool to pass on wealth, a significant amount of wealth, to the next generation. Part of the reason why the Walton family is still one of the wealthiest families around. So it can be used both early in life to build wealth, cash over time, like Bob Hope did. It could be used for business purposes, like Ray Kroc or Walt Disney did, to expand, build something, right? And it can be used later in life, like Sam Walton did, to pass on assets on a tax-favored basis to the next generation. Another well-documented example is JCPenney. JCPenney's was dealing with the stock market crash of 1929. So again, another point I want you to help you understand is this is not a new idea. This has been used extensively for decades and decades. It just doesn't get the press that, frankly, I think it should, or the attention, or whatever. But anyway, during the 1929 stock market crash, of course, JCPenney was unable to get funds from banks to keep JCPenney's operating. So he had $3 million in his policy cash that he used to keep JCPenney's open during the Great Depression. And that's how JCPenney's was able to survive the Depression, because think about it a minute. Banks were closing, shutting down. There was no access to funds. Nobody was getting money anywhere. Yet he had $3 million in this policy, and he had full access, no restrictions whatsoever, of those monies to keep his business open. Now, that's a fairly dramatic example, but it gives you an idea, and I'll give you a more recent example, a current example with a client of mine, not so famous, but similar. He was a contractor, and we had set up one of these personal bank policies for a couple of years prior, and he'd been putting money into it. I think he was putting money into it each month. He was looking at it more as of a longer-term retirement funding plan, which is fine. It can work perfectly well that way, too. His attitude was, by getting 6%, dividends, tax-free, compounded over a period of time, that ain't bad. And it's with guarantees and all that good stuff. That works for me, because it's his attitude, and a lot of entrepreneurs have, is their business income varies depending on business cycles and seasons and whatnot. Having some consistency with your money and money growing on a consistent, regular basis is very appealing to a lot of people who their income is not so consistent. Whether you're a business owner, you're 1099, gig economy that we're in, there's more and more people that have their income inconsistent than ever, probably. And that having that consistency and growth in your money just feels right and makes sense. And so I run into a lot of folks that don't want to I'm not saying taking risk and to grow your money is the wrong thing to do. But what I am saying is, for some people, it's the wrong thing to do for their personality and their income and what they're dealing with. They've got enough inconsistency in their life, if you know what I'm trying to say. So this gentleman was like that. So he's putting money away for the future, and had been doing that for a couple of years. Contacted me one day in a panic. He said, "I've got a problem. The IRS had shut down all his accounts. He had all his accounts, business and personal, at the same bank, which I don't typically recommend for a business owner, but anyway, he did. And they'd shut everything down because he'd had a payroll tax problem with the IRS. Now, what it turned out was he had changed payroll companies. He had paid his taxes, but the new payroll company had not reported it on the right the right tax ID number. So basically, it looked like his company had not paid any payroll tax for the previous year or so. So the IRS, basically just came in and just shut everything down. He goes, I've got payroll next week. I've got contractors. And if they don't get paid, they're going to get pissed, and I'm going to lose them, and all this. It's going to cost them, a fortune, as he put it. He says, you mentioned that the monies were growing in this policy. He says, are those funds still available? Can I access them? So you can mention I could do that. Can I access them so I can make payroll? Are they frozen like everything else? We checked. I said, nope, they're fully available. No problem. So what he did is he quickly went up and set up a new bank account. I said, go set up a bank account so we have an account to deposit this money into. And so he went and did that. Within 3 days, he had the money. He made the payroll, and he got the problem resolved in a couple of weeks after that. But he was able to make payroll because he had this cash reserve in this policy that was just growing. It was not under the it was under the radar, if you know what I'm saying. It wasn't illegal or anything like that. It just wasn't part of his normal, what the IRS was looking at to tap and that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is that he shared with me, look, don't put all your eggs in your basket. Don't have all your money in one place. And, if you're in business or whatever, be sure you have some cash reserves, and you have it in a place like this where the funds aren't so easily accessible for someone else just to attack or attach and those kinds of things. And depending on the state you're in and things like that, there's some guarantees, there's some protections, some liability protections. There's some financial protections, credit protect from creditors and things like that are available too. Contact us at yourpersonalbank.com for the rules in each state, because they vary by state, but those are in place in many cases. And so in his case, it was also. So this was protected money that couldn't be attached by a creditor. So that's also why it helped him. Well, as he says, it saved his tail, okay? That's the nice way to put it. My point is, you never know when an opportunity or an emergency or situation is going to occur, and having that cash reserve is so important, and having that money available and not kill your future if you have to pay taxes or penalties or surrenders or any of those kinds of things. The money's just readily available if you need it, and that's so powerful and important. Another example, we're in an election year. John McCain, for example, in his 2008 presidential campaign, his initial campaign financing. Now remember, this was in 2008. Remember what was going on then? We were in the Great Recession. And getting campaign financing from banks, or any financing for that matter, was difficult, even for someone who was running for president like John McCain. And so he was able to access $3 million of cash from his policy to do his initial campaign financing to run for president. Now, you can argue whether that was a good investment or not, but my point is this. If those of you don't remember, he ended up losing the election. But the reality is, even folks, the powerful, well-connected, he'd been a senator for decades, sometimes struggle to get financing when they need it for something they're trying to accomplish. And John McCain was one that used his policy and was able to do that and benefit from positive arbitrage and all that still too. So that's a little bit more recent example. Stay tuned in the next segment, and I'm going to share a few more. We're having fun sharing examples of famous people, and famous examples of how they've used your personal bank, and you can too.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back. We're doing some fun today. We're sharing some famous examples of people that have used Your Personal Bank in their lives to make a difference or get financing when they couldn't get it any other way. And I've shared examples with Ray Kroc at McDonald's, Walt Disney. It's how he built Disneyland after being turned down by over 300 banks. Bob Hope. It's how he was able to become producer in some of his movies and became a multimillionaire. Franklin Roosevelt, the majority of his net worth when he passed away was in high cash value policies. So he's a firm believer in this. Sam Walton used it to pass on a significant amount of wealth on a tax-favored basis to the next generation. So again, this can be a tool used for both growing wealth and passing it on tax-favored to the next generation. J.C. Penney managed to keep pennies open during the Great Depression by using the cash in his policy, and he couldn't get financing access to funds anywhere else. And John McCain did his initial campaign financing for his 2008 presidential election when financing was difficult with banks through the Great Depression, if you remember. Great Recession, they call it. I'm sorry. So these are just some fun examples and various situations where people struggle getting financing elsewhere, or it was more favorable to do it here. Many times able to maintain and keep positive arbitrage, so earn interest on their money. But I'm going to give you the last example I want to share with you is one that's kind of more near and dear to my heart because I know the person personally who helped create and put this situation plan together. And this one is about Jim Harbaugh, head coach of Michigan. And the Money Radio sister station, you probably heard the Fan Fanatic, 1580 AM or 99.3 FM. I'm sure you've heard the promos. They'll appreciate this for sure. But back in 2016, the University of Michigan and head coach Jim Harbaugh agreed to a contract amendment to increase his pay. Now, by the way, this is from an ESPN article, and the title of the article is Michigan Jim Harbaugh agreed to increase compensation in form of life insurance loan. See, here's the thing, and like I said, one of my mentors is a tax attorney who was the primary person that structured this deal, put this together. I've talked to him about it personally on several occasions. I've had dinner with this gentleman, this tax attorney, on a number of occasions, and I've spent a lot of hours speaking to him about various different things, including this situation. So I'm quite familiar. And the bottom line is Michigan wanted to renegotiate Jim Harbaugh's contract, give him a bonus, a raise, right? And, Jim's already in the high tax, top tax bracket scenario. So getting a raise when you're getting taxed on a third to half of your money is not overly exciting, even for somebody who's making a lot. So basically what they did, and this is not uncommon to what's called an executive bonus plan. And what I want to do is I want to share with you a couple thoughts on it in general. Now, a point I tell people is the zeros, take away zero, add a zero, the principle works the same. So although we're talking about some big dollars with a high-profile coach, Jim Harbaugh with Michigan, the reality is this can work for just nearly anyone. So the bottom line is what the Michigan did is they funded a high cash value policy for Jim. Michigan and his wife are co-beneficiaries. So if something happened to Jim Harbaugh, University and his wife are going to get a big check. Okay. But ideally, it's designed to grow cash. It's a way to pay him a bonus. And so basically the funds, the monies are funded into the policy. There's a vesting schedule. So it's called golden handcuffs. So anybody out there with a business who's got a key employee or key person, and you want to set up a golden handcuff kind of situation where you pay them a bonus, you can pay it to them on a tax-favored basis, and yet make sure they stay on for several years, the golden handcuffs. This is the tool that's often used. So bottom line is there's a vesting schedule, but bottom line is the Michigan funds the policy, funds the cash. Jim can access the funds through policy loans. He can get the positive arbitrage, all that fun stuff, and get it on a tax-favored basis, which is a tremendous benefit to Jim Harbaugh. And because of the vesting schedule in place, and this particular plan, like it points out, is a 5-year vesting schedule in the article, so it's public record. Jim has, if he leaves early, basically Michigan gets to keep a portion of those funds. You see what I'm saying? So it's a golden handcuff. The bottom line is Michigan was prepared to pay him more money one way or the other, right? The university was. And so when you have an executive bonus or you have a key person situation or you want to pay somebody some more money and they're already in a high tax bracket scenario, this is a tool that's very, very often used by companies, by individual companies, to pay that key person that extra bonus, that additional bonus, and do it on a tax-favored basis. Now, it can be structured a couple of different ways depending on how the company and the individual wants to structure it, just so you know. But the reality is it saves a lot in taxes overall for that key person. And so I was talking literally last week to a gentleman who I'm working with who's getting involved as a consultant. I can't really say yet because this is all being put together as we speak. But the reality is He's looking at a new position as a consultant with a bonus, and he understands how this tool works because he's already talked to me about he's setting up a policy for himself as a client himself, and he wants to get paid the bonus and get it on a tax-favored basis, which only makes sense. So my point is this, I guess I'm trying to share with the whole show today, the famous stories, which are kind of fun to share. And if you missed that, go to yourpersonalbank.com, listen to the previous segments or any of the previous shows. This is a tool that's used quite often, quite commonly, and for quite a long time. And so just because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean it's not valid or doesn't work, as it works well for many, many people. And just understand it's just not common knowledge for the general public, which is one of the purposes of this show, is to share with people some of these scenarios, some of these situations where this personal bank tool really works to enhance compensation or help with business or opportunities or pass on wealth in the next generations on a tax-favored basis, and you name it. There's so many different situations where the personal bank, or increasing your rate of return, okay, getting the positive arbitrage, all those things you can take advantage of. But it all starts with contact. It starts with a conversation. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Let's set up a time to chat. We can chat on the phone, do a little GoToMeeting kind of thing, Zoom, whatever. And I can share with you a little bit more, answer your questions, and we can come up with a plan or a situation that can make sense, in most cases, to improve your financial situation, to give you access to more funds, have more liquidity on your money, be able to access the funds if and when you need them for whatever reason, not have to face tax situations or penalties or anything else like that, surrender fees or anything along that line. Be able to use those dollars, whether you're using them to supplement retirement or pay expenses or invest in other things, and still get a positive rate of return. Keep the difference. Again, I say this all the time. If you're earning 6 and you're getting charged 3 to 3.5 in the threes, what's going on? Your money's still growing. You're keeping the difference. You're keeping 2-3%, aren't you? And it's that difference. Again, that's extra money. That's icing on the cake. Okay? That's the gravy. It's over and above, in addition to everything else you're already doing. So again, to get more information on this, I'll be happy to talk to you about it at yourpersonalbank.com. And as always, stay tuned to the Your Personal Bank Show every Tuesday at noon and Thursday at 1 on 1510 AM or 105.3 FM.
Listen Tuesday at noon and Thursdays at 1 for more information on Your Personal Bank. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.